How's it going, everybody? Yeah. Thanks for coming out. Got another beer school, monthly, obviously. So today we're doing judging for comps. I know we've talked a lot about doing comps and things like that, and so I apologize if it seems like I'm over-inundating and all that kind of stuff. But with Sunshine coming up, I just wanted to kind of go over some of these facets of things, and then after Sunshine's done, I promise we'll go back into like learning how to make stuff and all that kind of stuff. So starting out, judging for comps, a lot of people I know are kind of hesitant to kind of either start putting their beers in there because they're afraid of negative feedback or things like that, and even then aren't exactly sure what the process is as far as how these beers are actually graded. And I'll go over to some options, or not options, but reasons why you should start jumping into it a little bit later. But this just kind of gives you a better idea as far as what the judges are looking for out of your beers should you decide to actually enter them in competitions. Everyone, if you don't have it in front of you, raise your hand, let me know, but we've got a lot of information packets out there right now. All of it looks a little random, but there's some score sheets that have already been copied on, length score sheets, SRM stuff, flavor wheel, things like that, that we'll kind of be referencing throughout the presentation. So I'll make sure that you bring up whatever we need to actually reference on the slide that we're doing it. So. And also, I am not BJCP certified or recognized. I am an apprentice, but we couldn't find somebody to do the presentation. If any of you out there want to stand up and give something into a little bit more depth or expand upon something, please be willing to do it. Feel free to stand up so that way we can actually get a little bit more correct information. Hey guys. So, starting out. First things first, if you guys are entering beers, you're going to need to find out where the comps are. Where are they doing it? How do you get your stuff into it? So basically, these are a couple different places that you can kind of go to. The CFHB site, Steve does a great job of making sure we have all the information as far as what local comps are coming up. Things like Hogtown, things like Sunshine, all that kind of stuff. If you ever have any questions, I'm sorry.
FloridaHomebrew.org, is that Florida or is that Orlando?
FloridaHomebrew.org is actually just a website that basically compiles a lot of the statewide competitions. There's also a lot of information there as well. So, AHA website, they have you can basically search by state during what month. So if there's ever anything that you want to actually send out of the state, you can always do that too because they have all the information there, all the website links as well. So you also have REGGIE beer, which does a pretty good job at having some of the upcoming ones. The reason why I wanted to reference this one is because this is the one that we actually go through. Wait, there we go. This is the one that we actually go through to sanction our competition that we do with Sunshine. So if you are entering things, you'll have to go through REGGIE beer, which actually just recently went through an update as well. So you'll basically go in, you'll start up a profile. You'll be able to go in and register your entries. It's fairly easy. If you guys ever have any questions, email us, let me know. We'll definitely help you out, but it's pretty straightforward. You can pay for your entries there. It tells you where you can drop them off, ship them to, as far as how to get them to the actual competition. And then also one thing that I super enjoy is that actually if the competitions are ran correctly, you should be getting your round one score sheet scanned in, and it'll actually log those on your profile. So at any point you can actually go in and reference any of your old score sheets from round one judging. So looking into it, who are the people that are judging your beers? Obviously, Florida, especially Central Florida, we're always trying to get as many people as we can to be able to get the credentials to judge beers. Unfortunately, a lot of times we don't have as many people as we need, so we often have to look outside of BJCP-sanctioned judges. So other ones that we actually utilize are professional brewers, people who may work in the brewing industry as either a brewer, might actually work in some sort of educational aspect of it. We've got beer sommeliers, which is a program I believe Siebel Institute has actually enacted. I believe they have an online course that you can do as well to kind of go through the testing. You can do certified or master Cicerone courses. The certified beer server isn't really an identified option on the score sheets, but once you get up to either certified or master, then you can kind of utilize that as while you may not have BJCP, you do have some experience in style guidelines, off flavors, things like that. And then also industry professionals. Bill Rossi, for example, he does a great job every year helping us out. So big round of applause for him. Thank you. Obviously, no BJCP certification, but at the same time, I think he's tried millions of beers just by having them in his bar. So when you start out and actually get into judging, a lot of times people will start out with stewarding. Stewarding kind of helps facilitates the logistics, the running around, getting everything done for the flight organization, copying down notes, and to give you a better idea, I know a lot of people out there are curious as far as how to get into that or what it entails. Lori actually went through an experience herself a few years ago. She's going to come up and tell you about how she got into everything.
Hi, thank you. A couple of years ago when Paul and I first joined the club, we had no idea what we were doing. Sunshine Challenge was coming up. We were asked, looking for volunteers for stewarding, for judging, and we were very hesitant because we didn't know what it involved. And so the question was raised, what exactly is stewarding? What do I need to do? I'm more than happy to volunteer my time, but I need to know what I'm doing. Come to find out, it was very, very straightforward. Basically helping out with the setup of the actual judging location, making sure that we have the cups on hand, the pens, the pencils, the score sheets for all the judges, making sure that they had their labels on there with their BJCP number, keeping score, making sure that all that stuff was filled out, and pouring the beers for the judges, announcing which ones were. This was entry number 1010, and it was a 21B. And learning, and in that time period, we were able to learn the different styles, the categories that go along with it. Got to taste the beers along with the judges. It was a wonderful learning experience to be able to actually taste the beers and listen to the judges talk about them and discuss the different beer flavors and what they were tasting. Great learning experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. Definitely, if anybody is asked, do you want us to help volunteer for stewarding, it's a great opportunity to learn, and you can actually start racking up points towards your BJCP for that. So definitely, if we're asking for volunteers for stewarding, it's definitely something that you should be volunteering for.
Awesome, thank you, Lori.
Sorry. Thanks, Lori.
Now, I definitely want to have her come up because she went through the exact same thing I've seen a lot of people do, which is where people are very, very hesitant to actually volunteer or jump in and be part of the process because they don't feel either A, they have the credentials, or they don't understand what the volunteer duty entails. And really, this is one of the only things that you can actually, the only way you can learn about it is by going through it.
Just show up.
What's up?
Just show up.
Show up. We'll put you to use. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
And not only that, like she said, like you're sitting there with some pretty competent people who are dissecting a lot of these beers, and you can take that information the way you want to take it. Some people just kind of like learning a little bit more about maybe some of the off flavors. Some people, like me personally, one of the reasons I love judging is because you're able to learn through a lot of other people's either successes or mistakes as far as what works for certain styles and what doesn't. But that's just me because I like to take that back from my own brewing experience.
And what you did wrong.
And what you might have done wrong, or next time I know I might be making a Doppelbock. And I remember that one Doppelbock I had in that competition, and it was awesome. And I'm going to research the hell out of making sure it tastes like just like that. So what are the judges looking for? I'm sure a lot of you guys have actually looked into the judging and as far as what the sheets in front of you have. You'll see a couple in front of you as well. One of them is actually a filled out score sheet, and John did an awesome job of kind of going in. Actually, I'll let you go into detail on this. If you want to go ahead and mention that.
All right, thank you, Chris. This is one that I took the BJCP way back with Ron Bach a couple times. This is from 2004. We used to have guest speakers come in there like KK. Matter of fact, Preston Hoover did it. Some of our members would come. Mike Irvin. He's got the best writing I've ever seen in my life. That's why he's a national. They could read what he wrote. Because a lot of these things, what you got to do if you're writing on these is make sure that it can be read. A lot of times the judges will scribble so fast that you can't read what they're writing or what they're trying to say. And that could be a little bit of effect from alcohol over the time of judging.
After the third flight, it does get a little wiggly.
If it's a Belgian Golden or a triple or something, it might make it a little effect. But really, if you would slow down a little bit and write so it can be read, it would sure be appreciated by the participants. This one again, if you look at this front page of this one here, it says fill in completely. What that means is, if you don't have a envelope label that these days a lot of us do, you'd have to write your name in, the category and the subcategory, and the entry number of whatever beer or style is being judged. And then there's some of the other things: the bottle condition, bottle inspection. Is there a ring on the neck? That could be a infection, or it could be a lot of proteins in the beer, and it might be normal there. So those are the things that, as you judge and as you steward, you learn these things, and you'll be able to decipher the difference, especially when you open it and it geysers out. You probably figure there's a little infection or it's really overcarbonated, something like that. On the aroma.
John, I'll be going into that.
Okay. Chris is going to go into a little bit to describe these things. The malts, the hops, the what are they? What are you looking for? What do you smell? What do you get? The backside of this is also a little better or more involved with flaws or with faults, I should say. And the front side of this tells you a little bit about them, but the back side's a lot more of how to correct your fault in your beer. If it have a problem, usually down at the bottom where you have overall impression, and you want to tell the brewer what you found with that beer, a lot of times this will help you. Or maybe you crush your grains too small, or maybe you, what's one of them? Sulfury rotten eggs. Check for. I have a hard time seeing them old.
Tastes like onions.
Check for infection. Check for excessive sulfates. Check for your yeast health. Some of these things, a lot of us can brew beer, but we really don't know when they turn out off, why it happens. And this list on the back is really a good list for why or what could have happened through the process of you brewing or making your beer, wine, or ciders. I'm going to hand it back over to Chris for a minute here. He's probably going to go over this a little more in detail than I would.
Yeah, I got a couple things.
And I just, the bottom one, the whole thing about beer judging is this: drinkability. If you judge a beer and you think, boy, I would have more than one pint of that, you probably want to score it pretty well. But if you take a sip or two of it and it's like, oh, I don't know about this, you probably don't want to score it very well. And that's a good way to base your judging points and lists. Anyway, here's Chris.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, bud.
Thank you, John.
So he did a really good job kind of going over that. And one thing that I wanted to point out too, on the back there, that is a very, very helpful information side of things. There's a lot of people out, every judge is going to be different. A lot of people might have a better ability to identify certain off flavors or flaws because something they've actually gone through themselves. And I hope none of you go through everything on here. But I can tell you specifically, there's a couple that I know because I messed up the beers and I figured out why. But at the same time, for everybody who doesn't have that experience, all the information's there. If it's something you want to get into, it's right there. There's no reason that if you do taste that in something, that you shouldn't be able to also write that down and get some feedback on it as well. So, all right. So, all of these are pretty straightforward. I don't want to beat a dead horse on them. I think we all kind of get the idea of what aroma and mouthfeel and those kind of things are. But it really does kind of come down to very, very specific things when people are judging your beer or with what the beer judges are actually looking for. So aroma can be a big component that obviously it's not worth a lot of points. Well, I'm sorry, that one is, I was thinking appearance. 12 points on aroma alone. That is an area to where, say a beer doesn't have as many aromatics as it should for that style, or maybe it smells a little off for that style. That can really hurt your score on things as well. Strengths and weaknesses as far as how they fit into the actual style guidelines. Everyone should have a style guideline around them at some point. I think I dropped some off. Those are all the new 2015s, by the way. If you haven't looked into those, please look into those because they are not horribly different, but fairly different than the 2008 that a lot of people are used to. But yeah, one thing that you want to do is you want to actually read through the aroma of some of these, the descriptors of them. A lot of people have this this mindset to where, oh, I've had Pilsners. I get what a Pilsner should smell like. You may not actually understand what the BJCP is looking for a Pilsner to smell like. So as you're actually smelling it in, read it through, see if a lot of those keynotes are there, or if they're not, or you're getting off flavors that aren't mentioned, make sure that you kind of document that as well. So. And then you got appearance. Again, I'm pretty sure everybody's familiar with the fact that Pilsner is supposed to be super light, and a stout's supposed to be pretty black. But as far as what the beer judges are looking for, you're going into things like clarity. If you've got a Kolsch and it's super cloudy, you're probably going to get docks and points on that. If you've got something that's known to be really effervescent, have this massive head retention, like say like a Belgian Saison or something like that, and there's just nothing for head retention, you're probably going to get docked off with things like that. Everyone's pretty much utilizing that SRM. You've got that sheet in front of you. SRM is the standard reference method for actually judging the color of beers. If you're going through each individual style in the BJCP guidelines, it'll actually give you in the vitals the range that the SRM should fall into. If it's outside of that range, then it is what it is. And it has to, knock off a little bit that way. If it falls in that, then it meets the guidelines for the beer. So flavor is a big one as well. I can't say this enough. This comes with personally taking responsibility and going out and trying to better your palate about this. There's nothing you can really read. There's no courses there are, but there's nothing you can really do to be able to get that understanding of what flavors of certain beers are without actually going through it. So I definitely recommend you guys go out and do that. The one thing I wanted to include too is the flavor wheel that's in front of you. I know I had this problem specifically whenever I first started doing judging or samplings or anything like that in any sort of manner. I would taste certain things, but I wouldn't know how to verbalize it. And I know a lot of people have that issue too, to where you grasp what you're tasting, but there's not really a way to verbalize or communicate that onto either paper or to another judge or that kind of aspect. So if you're ever actually trying a new beer and you're trying to dissect it a little bit, I know it sounds super nerdy, but check out the flavor wheel, man. Like, you actually might be able to get some certain notes that you never would have actually figured out just by kind of going around and being like, well, it's not grassy, it's kind of vegetal, but it's a little piney, but piney is kind of like that. You can kind of dissect it a little bit more. Helps kind of train your focus as far as what you're looking for out of certain beers as well. So, any questions on that?
Where do you get a flavor wheel like that?
I actually just Googled beer flavor wheel,
Okay.
and you can find a bunch of them.
I have one.
So, yeah, one thing that I was going to mention at the end of the presentation, but I'll probably mention it like 3 or 4 times throughout. There is an app for Android and iPhone called the Beer Judge app. Look it up. Definitely download it. It's got a flavor wheel on there. It's got an SRM calculator to the point to where if you're in like a well-lit area, you can actually take a picture of the beer and it'll tell you what the SRM is. It's awesome. So I super recommend that. The flavor wheel is definitely on there as well. And it also goes into a lot of those off flavors too. So it has a full list of all those. You can go into why that happened and all that kind of stuff. So mouthfeel, again, pretty straightforward. Everyone understands that something might be super light and effervescent, or it might be very heavy and viscous and all that kind of stuff. But it really does play a pretty good component as far as how people are dissecting the beer. You really have to compartmentalize these very, very just basic components of the beer and be able to dissect those specifically. So mouthfeel, it doesn't account for a lot of points. I think it's, 5-ish? Yeah, 5. But something like a super thin Imperial Stout is probably not going to be as enjoyable as an Imperial Stout should be. Or like a super heavy Saison, it's going to be a little bit muddy because of the amount of like either fermentabilities or adjuncts or things like that might be in there. Also, kind of a side note too with the adjuncts, if it is in a category like say it's a rye IPA, you're going to kind of want that rye to be there and kind of apparent flavorful wise, and then also for that body wise as well. Or like an oatmeal stout or something like that. There are a few off flavors that you can tell by the mouthfeel as well, as far as the sensory aspect goes. Diacetyl is a really, really big one, where you get kind of like this oily, slick kind of sensory aspect to it, that if you're paying attention, you can typically find it that way. I personally included that information because I am almost nose blind to diacetyl. I don't know why, I can't smell it. I don't get it. But I know that whenever I kind of like smell it a little bit and then taste that immensely, it's probably in there, especially with conferring to another judge and seeing if that's actually a component of there. Any questions on that? Great. So at the very bottom of the score sheet, you'll see the overall impression, and this obviously accounts for a lot. I think it's 10 points for how your beer is going to be judged. And if you are getting into stewarding or judging and things like that, there's a couple things you want to actually put together. Because you have to understand, these people went through a really, really long day to make this beer, and then they paid their money to send it to you. And then people actually help pouring it into a cup and making sure it's numbered. So what you can do is give them as much feedback as possible. Either help them out, let them know where they're doing well. Constructive criticism, I can't stress that enough. I've seen a couple score sheets floating around online to where people are like, oh, this is disgusting, this is the worst beer I've ever had. There's no reason to say that. Absolutely not. This, for every one veteran that's in there and like actually putting beers into comps, there might be 4 of the people who've never done it before, and the fact that your comments were so bashful, if you will, they may never actually enter a comp, or they might give it up. So understand that you do have a little bit of a responsibility to the people who are paying to have you do this. So, but constructive criticism-wise, always make sure you're trying to do as much as possible to dissect. I know a lot of other judges have had the same issue where the beer is great, and I don't want to say anything negative about it, but you almost feel bad saying how they could improve it because it's already great, but there's always an area of opportunity to improve things. So, and then at the same time, being able to utilize that flaw information and be able to find out, like, hey, maybe you had something crazy oxidized. You know, look at your transferring methods whenever you're going into secondary fermentation, or maybe when you've got something like DMS, check your boil times, all that kind of stuff. Offer like a little bit of constructive criticism on it. So, oh, I did want to go over too, utilizing your scoring guide. This is just something that helped me out a lot. By dissecting certain parts of the beer as you're going through with all those 5 different parts, I found that at the end, sometimes the score added up was a little outside of how I felt the beer actually was as a whole. So in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see the what are they referring to it as? The scoring guide, if you will. You'll see like outstanding, very good, excellent, things like that. I always kind of fall back on that too, and I think to myself, as a full beer, in the giant scheme of things, is this outstanding? Is this very good? Is it slightly flawed? Like, kind of find that number range, and then you can also kind of go back and see where your numbers maybe been a little too high or a little too low, depending on where you can kind of compensate for that. So, and then also, always make sure your review is comparable. Judges do have kind of a set kind of ethics or morals aspect to where after they've tried them, they'll start talking about it together as well. Certain judges might pick up certain things out of beers that the other judge wouldn't as well. Everybody's different. But as long as you guys can kind of come to a pretty good consensus, I believe like the rule is anywhere from 3 to 5 points as far as how close you want to be on the score, then you can typically tell that you guys both have a pretty similar review as far as what the beer is specifically. So, any questions? So again, trying to basically get out of that hesitation that a lot of people have, either getting into stewarding or judging. These are a couple reasons why I think you should definitely get into it. You're supporting brewers. I'm sure every single one of you who have ever made a batch of beer had some at least tiny little voice in the back of your mind wondering how it actually is, outside of your own opinion on it. Because granted, if I make something, I know I'm biased. So I just don't even try to review my own stuff anymore. But you're helping out a lot of other people who may get really, really into the hobby. They may not get really into the hobby, but you're giving them objective feedback. You're not a friend of theirs who'd be like, oh, dude, you made beer, that's awesome. You're actually somebody who has never met them, and you're giving them actual objective feedback and how they can better their beer or just how it is in general. So, also, I think it makes you a better beer drinker. After going through a lot of these flights and trying a lot of things too, you start dissecting, like say you go out for a pint over at Rossi's or whatever, and you start dissecting and be like, wow, this beer's a lot better than I remember it being. Like you start to appreciate things a little bit more. Or this beer is maybe a little bit worse than I thought it was actually. And then also it makes you a better brewer. Like I mentioned before, the reason why I love doing this is because I learn from everybody's successes and failures. It's awesome. Like I know that if there's something that I super loved out of a certain beer, that I can try to research how to repeat that. Or should I try something that didn't work out well for that style, I know to kind of stay away from that aspect of things. So it all depends on how you want to take this information. So, couple guidelines as far as what I found through my own experience. Always, like he was mentioned before, be as in-depth as possible. Like the way I had it said to me, like write it down as if they're a 5-year-old and they don't understand what's going on. Like literally break every single thing down. I would rather have a score sheet that I had to read longer than a score sheet that didn't have enough information on it. Like somebody just saying, oh, it was malting. Like, just describe the malt. You know what I mean? Or oh, it was super piney, but what else was going on outside of pines? We all know piney and grapefruit for IPAs. Get a little bit bigger on your vernacular. So, point out flaws constructively. Like I said before, don't bash beers. That is such a rude thing to do. People are they're kind of vulnerable when they're putting these beers in the competitions. Be polite about it. Another kind of pseudo. It's not a rule, but one of those kind of just do this. Was try to never score a beer under 19, because when you get the 19, you're pretty much like, all right, I understand. Thank you. So
You need to take up golf.
yeah, or just go back to the drawing board. So I can say that as somebody who's gotten a 19. I understand. Hey, they're not all winners, okay? So, and also, one thing that I noticed too, people don't do this often, compliment them. If they're doing something right, let them know they're doing something right. It is the job as the judge to sit there and dissect everything that might be wrong with the beer, but oftentimes we forget, hey, well done on that actual malt bill, or nicely done on the way those phenolics actually
You want them to come back and compete again.
Yeah, I'm not trying to give you a pat on the back for every entry you do, but also at the same time, if you did something right, you should know.
You really don't. There was an issue where some judges.
There was an issue a few years ago where some of the judges were absolutely brutal and insulting in their remarks. They literally said you should take up a different hobby and things like that, trying to be cute. Keep in mind that we were all beginning brewers at some point. Thank you. And you want, like all of us, you want to grow in your skill, and you want people to come back and enjoy the whole competing process. That's the bottom line.
Thanks, man. And then, like he was just saying, offer advice when you can. Always make sure that if you've like me personally, I've made a lot of bad beer before I started making good beer. It happens. And even when my beer was drinkable, it still had things that could have been better. So oftentimes I'll run into certain things that I know I've done wrong before, and I can say, hey, I ran into that problem myself when I first tried to do sour mashing. I got this horrible off flavor. I found out it might be because of this. Next time you try doing that, try this out and see if it works. Not a, hey, you did it wrong, more of a, this helped me. You know what I mean? And then also, judge each beer individually. Be objective. Everyone has their own opinions on certain styles. Everybody has their own opinions on how certain beers should be. But it is our job to translate that guide that's sitting in front of you and only do that. Just because it might have hit all points for a solid Pilsner, but because you've had certain Pilsners that you think are better, it doesn't mean that you should sit there and say it's docked for anything else. Also, judge each beer individually, and I say that because a lot of times you're in a series of flights, and so everybody has this kind of habitual aspect where you want to fault tonight. You almost start putting beer 1 versus beer 2 in your mind, or beer 2 versus beer 3 in your mind, or it was better than the other one that I had. You cannot do that. Every beer is specifically supposed to be judged by itself. So, with that being said, we're going to try some stuff out. So we kind of worked up a little bit of thing where John was nice enough to bring in some beer. If you want to tell him about that, do you want to tell him what's wrong with it? Or?
Sure. Well, no.
I don't know. Do you guys want to know what's wrong with it, or do you guys want to try to figure it out?
No.
All right, cool. Awesome. I'll go fix the other one up if you want to go ahead and start pouring that one. Just give us a couple minutes. We'll get all the samples out for you guys, all right? Okay. So the first one that John went around poured, was it a pale or an IPA?
It was a pale.
Pale. Okay, so that one would have been submitted as a pale ale.
This one here?
Yep.
What a crock.
Anybody want to take a stab as far as what went wrong with it?
I'm no judge. I don't know exactly what they did, but I've never won it. So it seems to be too dark for a pale ale.
Okay, seems to be too dark.
And I'm tasting something burned in there.
Something burnt? Okay,
That's really all I'm getting.
gotcha.
Sorry to interrupt your
Stringent? A little metallic? Get metallic?
Not like metallic I'm used to tasting like blood metallic,
Yeah.
Kind of different style.
So, yeah. So this one got oxidized during the transfer of it, right?
Yeah, I forgot to put my CO2 in my secondary carboy, so when I transferred in about a day later, I said, oh no, and bottled it anyway, thinking it might be good, but it's very oxidized to me. John Lagonka said it best, it's down the drain beer.
It's not that bad.
Well, it did. Well, I should say this was the beer with the experimental hop, the 438 hop, which I was really hoping it would turn out well, but I missed up on the transfer. So yeah, I give it. When I go,
Here's the six pack, man.
when I go to Bolin down the street here, and they come up to me in the parking lot, I'm like, "Here, you had one of these." And they take it every time. They love it.
Awesome. Thank you for letting us learn from your mistakes. Definitely a round of applause for him for doing that. 'Cause I don't know many people would have been like, yeah, I messed up. You guys want to use it? Like, so the second one was submitted as a Pilsner. I'm not going to be specific on the type, the Hebrew or German or whatever. It's a Pilsner, and I added something to it. Any guesses? Comments, concerns, anyway. Fingernail polish remover? Nope. Getting some acetone? Smells like what? Smells like bananas. That's because I added banana extract to it. So that would have come off as like estery or isomyl acetate would have been the big component, which is usually a byproduct of fermentation temperatures, which not unpleasant, but also a flaw for that style. So, cool? So that's pretty much everything we had for you today. We're going to get the meeting started here in a few minutes. Yeah, if you guys have any questions on anything you guys heard today, what's that? Yeah, definitely come up to either myself, John, or Lori. So thanks, like, a round of applause for them for helping out, for telling the story. So thank you very much, guys.